Sacred threads, a journey through the world's religions. Before temples rose or scriptures sang, before names like Yahweh, Buddha, or Allah echoed through history, humanity looked up at the stars and asked, "Why are we here?" Sacred Threads is a sweeping 15-part audio odyssey into the heart of our deepest yearnings, for meaning, for order, for the divine. From the silent meditations of Jain monks to the cosmic battles of Zoroastrian myth, from the fire of Sinai to the path beneath the Bodhi tree, this series traces the origins, stories, and living truths of the world's great religions and the new ones still being born. You'll walk with prophets, philosophers, and skeptics. You'll witness the rise of sacred texts and hear the whispered doubts of those who walked away. And through it all, you'll discover not just what others believe, but what belief itself reveals about us. Whether you're faithful, skeptical, or just curious, this is more than a history of religions. It's a mirror, and the question it reflects is eternal. What do you worship when the world falls silent?
The dawn of religion.
Episode 10. Order and Benevolence, Confucianism. Narrator's Prelude. A reed flute answers the clack of cartwheels on a rutted road. A village shrine smells of millet and smoke. Behind the altar, tablets bear the names of the dead. A minor official in plain robes pauses, bows toward the tablets, and turns to his pupils. To govern is to straighten, he says, and to straighten begins at home, with how you bow, how you speak, how you keep faith. Welcome to episode 10 of The World's Religions. Tonight we step into a tradition that does not promise heaven by leaving earth, but teaches heaven's order by honoring earth. How we address a parent, keep a promise, repair a name, tend a city. Confucianism is often called a philosophy, sometimes a religion, often a way of life. It is, at heart, a discipline of becoming human together. We will meet Confucius, hear the Analects as a living conversation, and watch his followers debate. Is human nature good or crooked and in need of steam and brace? We'll end part 1 at the moment. Confucianism becomes the curriculum of an empire. 1. Before the master, an age that needed repair. 1.1. Spring and autumn to warring states. By Confucius's time, 6th to 5th century BCE, the Zhou order, the old network of ritual obligations that held the world together, had thinned. Dukes fought dukes, ministers assassinated lords, grain taxes rose, armies marched, court music soured. Out of this chaos grew the 100 schools, not schools with buildings, but schools of thought competing to save a civilization. Mohists preached universal concern and thrift. Legalists engineered clear laws and harsh punishments. Naturalists tracked yin-yang and the 5 phases to forecast harmony. Taoists advised letting go and flowing with things. Confucius took another tack. Repair the fabric. Begin in the family. Extend to the state. Align with Tian, heaven. Not a personal god, but moral order writ in sky and season. 2. Confucius, Xunzi, the teacher and his times.
2.1 A Life in Outline.
Born Kongqiu, Latinized Confucius, in the state of Lu, modern Shandong, circa 551 BCE by traditional reckoning, he knew both poverty and posts of modest rank. He served briefly in Lu, overseeing granaries, then justice, then wandered among states offering counsel, rule by virtue, lead through ritual and example, rectify names so words fit realities. Courts heard him politely, sometimes employed him, often ignored him. He returned to Lu to teach, famously welcoming students of diverse backgrounds. Tradition says thousands studied with him, 70-odd mastered his heart. He died around 479 BCE, disappointed in politics, victorious in pedagogy. He left no treatise, he left people. 2.2a Religious Humanism. Confucius performed rituals with exacting reverence and spoke of heaven with awe. Asked about spirits, he steered learners back to the living. If you do not yet know how to serve people, how can you serve ghosts and spirits? His piety was ethical. The way to honor heaven was to be humane. 3. The Analects, Lunyu, a book of short roads. 3.1. What kind of book is this? The Analects is not a sermon or system, it's dialogue. Glints of talk, memory, and example gathered by disciples over generations. That's why it feels alive. A teacher answers different people differently, names the right medicine for each temperament. 3.2. The Grammar of the Good Life. The book's key words are small, but they carry a civilization. Ren, humanness, co-human feeling. Not mere sentiment, but care that sees. Li, ritual propriety, the choreography of respect, bows, speech, roles. Not empty etiquette, patterned kindness that trains desire. Yi, righteousness, doing what fits moral shape, even at cost. Ji, wisdom, discernment. Xin, trustworthiness, keeping one's word. Zhong and Shu, loyalty and reciprocity, wholeheartedness toward duty, and the old silver rule, do not impose on others what you would not want for yourself. All of this forms the Xunzi, the exemplary person, once gentleman, but Confucianism keeps opening the door wider. Opposite stands the Xiaoren, the small person, petty and grasping. 3.3 Rectification of Names, Zhengming. If words slide, duties slide. Let the ruler be ruler, the father, the son, says a famous line. This isn't hierarchy for its own sake, it's semantic honesty. Titles must match behavior. A minister who enriches himself while the state starves is not a minister in any morally meaningful sense. To rectify names is to align language and reality, hope and habit. 3.4 Government by Virtue. Confucius counseled leading by example. If the ruler is humane, people will be ashamed to do wrong. If the ruler only uses punishments, people will evade and fear but not reform. The metaphor is North Star. Stable, not coercive, guiding without shouting. 3.5 Filial piety, xiao, and family as school. Xiao is the lab where Ren grows. Feeding parents is easy. Respecting them, speaking gently, counseling them when they err without contempt is the art. Filial piety, at its best, is not blind obedience. It is relational responsibility that extends outward, family to neighborhood to state. 4. 5 classics and a canon to live by. Confucius revered an earlier archive of Zhou wisdom, poems, documents, rites, music, chronicles. Later dynasties would call them the 5 classics, Shi Jing, classic of poetry, folk songs and court odes, the hearts of farmers and kings. Shu Jing, classic of documents, speeches and edicts, history as moral theatre. Li Ji, Yi Li, record, ceremonies of rites, how to marry, mourn, feast, ritual as ethics embodied. Yi Jing, classic of changes, hexagrams and commentaries, a grammar of transformation. Chun Chu, spring and autumn annals of Lu, a spare chronicle the master may have edited. Later readers found moral judgment hidden in word choice. These texts became Confucian scripture not because Confucius wrote them, but because he curated and interpreted them as training in virtue through culture. 5. Mencius, Mengzi. The wellspring is good. 5.1 A defender of benevolent rule. A century after Confucius, Mencius, 4th century BCE, travelled from court to court, arguing that the people's welfare is the root of the state. Grain stores, fair taxes, rest for farmers, these are not luxuries, they are moral necessities. 5.2 Four Sprouts of the Heart. Mencius's signature claim, human nature is originally good. He doesn't mean we never err. He means we are born with sprouts that can grow into virtue. Compassion, ren, humaneness. Shame, yi, righteousness. Deference, li, propriety. Right-wrong sense, ji, wisdom. See a child about to fall into a well, and you instinctively lunge. That lunge is not calculation, it is human. Education waters these sprouts, bad environments wither them. 5.3 Mandate and the right to remonstrate. For Mencius, Tian, heaven, grants a mandate to rulers, but not forever. A tyrant loses the name king. To remove him is not regicide, but justice. He does not preach revolution lightly. He anchors authority in moral performance, not bloodline alone. 6. Xunzi, straightening the crooked wood. 6.1 A stern craftsman of order. Contemporary with late Mencian lines, Xunzi, 3rd century BCE, looked at war and greed and argued the opposite. Human nature is bad, not demonically so, but crooked, a rush of appetites. Left alone, we fight. Rights and laws are the steam and brace that straighten wood into beams. 6.2 Heaven without favoritism. Where Mencius spoke of heaven's moral lean, Xunzi emphasized heaven's regularity, seasons, cycles, not interventions. If there's famine, don't blame heaven, fix irrigation and moderate taxes. His is a naturalistic theology. Respect heaven's patterns, but don't expect it to bend rules for you. 6.3 Ritual and music as social technology. Rights, rank desires, allocate honor, and prevent collision. Music harmonizes emotion. Together they turn raw impulse toward shared forms. The goal is not suppression, but channeling. Two of Xunzi's brilliant wayward students, Han Feizi and Li Si, would carry a harder version of this logic into legalism and the Qin. 7. Qin unification and the perils of hard order. In 221 BCE, the Qin king unifies China under a legalist program, standardized weights, scripts, roads, strict laws. Classical law tells of book burnings and scholars buried alive. Modern historians debate scope and motives, but no one doubts the Qin's severity. The empire it built collapsed within 15 years. Order, by iron alone, did not last. 8. The Han synthesis, Confucianism becomes a statecraft. 8.1 From Huang Lao, Ease to Confucian Merit. Early Han rulers, 3rd to 2nd centuries BCE, governed lightly under Huang Lao influences, a Taoist legalist blend. Under Emperor Wu, r. 141 to 87 BCE, the court turned decisively to Confucian learning as state ideology, largely through the Council of Dongzhongshu. The Imperial Academy trained officials in the classics. Erudites, Bozi H-Dance, held chairs in the 5 classics. A recommendation system and later examinations sought talent beyond heredity. 8.2 Heaven and the Ruler, Correlative Cosmology. Dongzhongshu's synthesis linked heaven and human government through omens and correspondences. Eclipses signal political failure, moral reform restores balance. This correlative cosmology is not modern science, but it moralized rule. Harvests and floods became ethical audits. 8.3 Debate on Salt and Iron, Yantielun. In 81 BCE, ministers argued whether the state should monopolize salt and iron to fund defense. Reformers invoked Confucian frugality and people's welfare. Pragmatists defended revenue. The debate shows Confucianism wrestling not just with virtue words, but with policy levers. How do we secure borders without crushing peasants? 8.4 Filiality, Law, and Daily Life. Confucian values entered law codes, marriage rites, mourning periods, ancestral sacrifice. The classic of filial piety, Xiao Jing, circulated widely, sometimes weaponized to police households, sometimes genuinely softening them. The ideal remained reciprocal. Parents care well, children honor wisely. Remonstrance, loyal dissent, is part of filial love. 8.5 Culture as Conscience. Han historiography, Sima Qian's records of the grand historian, modeled the moral historian, praising and blaming across dynasties. Confucianism was not a priesthood, it was a culture training officials to speak truth to power with stories. 9. Why ritual matters and how it goes wrong. 9.1 Ritual as kindness in form. In Confucius's vision, Li is kindness embodied. The bow that preserves another's face, the seating that soothes rivalry, the funeral that dignifies grief. Done well, ritual becomes second nature, a beautiful habit. 9.2 The danger of husks. Confucius scolded husk ritual, performing forms without heat of heart. Later ages would sometimes freeze his living art into etiquette for domination. Reformers, Mencius, some Han officials, kept insisting people first. The test of rights is whether they help humans flourish. 10. Key ideas in one breath. Ren, humaneness, feeling with that grows from family outward. Li, ritual, patterned respect that educates desire. Yi, righteousness, do what fits the moral grain, not what merely profits. Xin, trustworthiness, say, mean, do, align. Zhong Shu, loyalty and reciprocity, wholehearted duty measured by do not do to others. Zhengming, rectification of names, reality and title must match. Xunzi, exemplary person, versus Xiaoren, petty, character, not class. Tian, heaven, moral order, mandate revocable. Education, not test prep. Self-cultivation through poetry, rites, music, history. These are not museum labels, they are training moves for citizens and rulers. 11. A short scene, governance by example. A magistrate hears a case. A son has reported his father for stealing a sheep. What would you do? Asks a student. The magistrate opens the Analects. In the well-ordered state, fathers cover for sons, and sons cover for fathers. A gasp. License to hide crimes? The magistrate shakes his head. No. The line means, in a truly humane village, the father would not take the sheep. The son would counsel him before the law arrives. The law would have little to do. The lesson is not corruption by kinship, it is pre-legal repair by relationship. Law remains. The goal is to need it less. 12. Where we pause and what comes next. We've walked with Confucius through an age of fracture, watched his disciples carry humanness into politics, heard Mencius argue for innate goodness and the people's right to remonstrate, and Xunzi warn that only formed habit turns appetite into virtue. We saw the Qin try iron order and fail fast. The Han install Confucian learning as the spine of rule, bridging moral example and statecraft. In Part 2, we will chart the Songming revival, Zhou Dunyi, Zhang Zai, Cheng brothers, Zhu Extam, and the metaphysics of Li, principle, and Qi, vital stuff. Watch Wang Yangming reignite conscience, Liangzhi, and the unity of knowledge and action. Follow Confucianism into Korea, Chosun, academy debates, ancestral rites, into Japan, Tokugawa, samurai ethics, merchant morality, and Vietnam. Enter examinations, family law, and village compacts, where ideals met rice and ink. faced the 19th to 20th centuries. Opium War, May 4th, iconoclasm, PRC suppression and revival, New Confucianism, Mu Zongsan, Tang Junyi, Shu Fuguan, Tu Wei Ming. Close with a field guide. What Ren, Li, Yi, and Zheng Ming can still do for schools, offices, and parliaments today without reinscribing patriarchy or hierarchy. A winter moon lifts over tiled roofs. Inside a lamplit study, a brush pauses above paper as snow whispers on the courtyard stones. The student breathes, remembers a line. To learn and at due times practice what one has learned, is this not a pleasure? And bends again to the page. Outside this room, the empire rises and falls. Inside it, a civilization rehearses itself through ink, music of ritual, grammar of kindness, choreography of duty. We left Confucianism at the moment it became the spine of the Han state, a curriculum for officials and a conscience for rulers. In part 2, that spine grows nerves and hands. We will watch the Song Ming revival remake metaphysics, follow Wang Yangming as he brings conscience to the center of the mind, see how examinations and academy life train generations, track Confucian ideas across Korea, Japan, and Vietnam, and walk through modern storms, from iconoclasm to revival, before closing with a field guide for using Ren and Li without smuggling patriarchy back in the door. 13. The Great Reweaving, Song Ming Neo-Confucianism. 13.1. Why a Revival? By the Song dynasty, 960 to 1279, China had changed. Cities boomed, printing spread, Buddhism and Taoism had grown rich portfolios of meditation and metaphysics. Confucian scholars admired Buddhist discipline and Taoist naturalness, yet worried that family, duty, and public service were fading. Their answer was not to copy rivals, nor to attack them blindly, but to reweave Confucian threads into a cosmology as deep as any monastery's and practical enough to run a village school. 13.2 Zhou Dunyi and the Turning Diagram. Zhou Dunyi, 1017 to 1073, writes a short treatise, The Explanation of the Diagram of the Supreme Ultimate. In a few pages, he paints a world where Taiji, the Supreme Ultimate, stirs, differentiating into Weijin and Yang, which spin out the 5 phases. From their cycling arise things and beings. Virtue is not an imported rule, it is alignment with this pattern. When the mind is tranquil and upright, the way's pivot can turn in you. 13.3. The Cheng brothers and the language of Li and Qi. Cheng Hao and Cheng Yi, 11th century, sharpen the revival. They speak of Li, principle, pattern, and Qi, vital stuff. Li is the intelligible structure of anything. A tree's treeness, justice is justness. Qi is the energetic matter that carries Li. Everything is a blend. If your Qi is turbid, the pattern blurs, clarified, and Li shines. Study and self-cultivation polish the lens. Cheng Hao insists Ren, humaneness, is the heart of heaven and earth. Cheng Yi emphasizes stern self-discipline. Between them, a path forms, quiet sitting to steady the mind. Investigation to see how principle runs through the world. 13.4 Xunzi and the family vast as sky. Xunzi, 1020 to 1077, in his Western inscription, throws open the window. Heaven is my father and earth my mother, and even such a small creature as I finds an intimate place in their midst. The great person regards all under heaven as one family. This is filial piety lifted into cosmic kinship. To love parents deeply is to learn a grammar of gratitude that can widen until all things are relatives. 13.5 Zhu Xi, curriculum builder of a civilization. Then comes Zhu Xi, 1130 to 1200, editor, commentator, and patient architect. He synthesizes his predecessors. Metaphysics. Lie is flawless principle. Qi is mixed, sometimes murky. Cultivation clarifies key so principle can act. Practice. Twin disciplines. Quiet sitting to calm the heart, mind, and investigation of things, Jie Wu, to see how patterns run through classics, nature, and conduct. Books. He elevates the four books, Analects, Mencius, Great Learning, Doctrine of the Mean, as the core curriculum, writing commentaries whose phrasing would steer the examination system for centuries. Community. He rebuilds White Deer Grotto Academy, models village compacts that bind neighbors to mutual aid and moral exhortation, and compiles family rituals, a manual to humanize weddings, funerals, and ancestral rites. Zhu Xi is sometimes accused of freezing living questions into orthodox formulas, yet his aim was practical clarity, to give scholars habits, reading, reflection, conversation, ritual that turn humane intention into steadily useful action. 14. Mind is principle. Wang Yangming and the turn inward. 14.1. Exile and awakening. Wang Yangming, 1472 to 1529, begins as a brilliant young official. After criticizing corruption, he is banished to a remote post in Guizhou. In a crude hut at Longchang, amid illness and isolation, he experiences a breakthrough. The mind-heart, X or N, is not a mirror passively reflecting truths outside. It is the living source of moral discernment. He calls this liangzhi, innate knowing. 14.2. Knowledge and action are one. For Wang, to know a duty but not do it is not to know it. Real knowing moves the limbs. He criticizes bookishness without transformation and proposes two accelerants. Rectify the mind, watch motives as they arise, trim self-deception. Extend innate knowing. Use liangzhi like a lamp. Wherever selfishness shades it, act to clarify. 4.3. The four-sentence doctrine and a warning label. Later, Wang's disciple Wang Ji summarized this stream as 4 points that many attribute to the master. 1. In its original substance, the mind has no good or evil. 2. When intention moves, good and evil appear. 3. Knowing good and evil is innate knowing. 4. Doing good and removing evil is the investigation of things. This is a meditative psychology married to ethics. Critics warned that no good, no evil could license apathy. Wang answered, the point is to see freshly, then move rightly. 14.4. The Taizhou current and everyday sages. A popularizing branch, sometimes called the Taizhou school, e.g. Wang Gen, Luo Rufang, later Li Ji, proclaimed that commoners can awaken. The marketplace has as much moral sky as the study hall. Authorities worried about laxity. They were not wholly wrong. Shortcut seekers appear in every revival. Yet Wang's main bequest endures. Responsibility lives in the present mind, not only in external pattern. 14.5 Zhu Xi versus Wang Yangming, 2 wings, 1 bird. Later, textbooks stage them as opponents, principle first versus mind first. In lived practice, many scholars used both wings, read widely, sit quietly, test conscience in action, examine failures without self-hate, return to poetry, rites, and service. The shared aim, become a person whose presence helps others become persons. 15. Exams, academies, and the machinery of merit. 15.1 How the ladder worked. From Tang and Song foundations through Ming and Qing, the civil service examinations became the main road to office. Local qualifying degree, Ziyucai. Provincial, Juren. Metropolitan and palace exams for Jinshi presented scholars. Candidates sat in cell-like booths for days, writing essays, eventually the notorious 8-legged essay, on the 4 books and 5 classics, often through Zhu Xi's lenses. The system was criticized for rigidity and test-driven pedantry, and rightly so at times. Yet it checked hereditary monopoly, opened some mobility, and made literacy a public good. 15.2 Academies and community compacts. Alongside exams, Shuyuan academies fostered debate and conscience. Teachers posted community compacts, Xiangyue, pledges to avoid lawsuits by mediation, help widows and orphans, repair bridges, plant trees. Confucianism here is civil society, not just state. 15.3 Family rituals and the ecology of care. Manuals like Zhu Shi's Family. Rituals taught families to humanize milestones, keep funerals solemn without ruinous expense, make weddings covenants, not displays. At their best, such rites reduce status anxiety and financial harm. At their worst, they hardened into performance. The Confucian meter remains, do forms that help people flourish. 16. Beyond China, Confucian worlds of East Asia. 16.1 Korea, Choson, scholarship as statecraft. When the Choson dynasty, 1392 to 1910, replaced Goryeo, it installed Neo-Confucianism as state ideology. Seowon academies dotted the valleys. Gwagyo exams selected officials. Jongmyo Shrine and royal ancestral rites became national liturgy. Two titans, Yi Huang, Toegye, and Yi Ilbai, Yulgok, debated the relation of principle and vital force and the moral psychology of emotions. 4-7 debate. The ideal was Yangban scholar officials who ruled by example. The reality included factional purges and rigid status. Yet village codes, school rituals, and a fierce respect for learning made Korea a Confucian power in its own right. 16.2 Japan, Tokugawa, order with arguments. Under the Tokugawa shogunate, 1603 to 1868, domain schools educated samurai in Jushi learning via the Hayashi lineage. The ethic of loyalty, frugality, and self-discipline informed what later generations called Bushido. But Confucianism in Japan was plural. Ito Jinsai and Ogyu Sorai attacked rote metaphysics, urging a return to the ancient learning of the early classics. Yomei Gaku, Wang Yangming's learning of the mind, stoked moral activism among reformist samurai. Merchants adapted Confucian trust and reciprocity to urban guilds. The result, an ethic that could serve order and also criticize it. 16.3 Vietnam, Mandarins, Temples, and Village Pact. In Jai Viet, exams and Confucian schools flourished under the Lei and later dynasties. Hanoi's Temple of Literature honored Confucius. Village life blended Confucian lineage halls with Buddhist and local cults. Mandarins wrote village codes. The imperial center leaned on Confucian administration long after borders shifted. 17. Modern storms, iconoclasm, reinvention, and return. 17.1 Late Qing pressure and the reformers' pivot. The 19th century hit China with opium wars, unequal treaties, and internal revolts. Some reformers argued that Confucianism was not the obstacle but the resource, a tradition of merit, moral rule, and learning that could underpin new schools, railways, diplomacy. Kang Yue reread the classics to present Confucius as a reformer, not a conservative relic. The 100 Days Reform, 1898, tried and failed to accelerate change. 17.2 May 4th Iconoclasm. In 1919, students filled Beijing streets, May 4th. They called for science and democracy and often shouted, "Down with Confucius and Sons," targeting patriarchy, foot-binding, arranged marriage, hierarchy entrenched under Confucian banners. The critique bit deep. Much that marched under Confucius's name had indeed harmed women and the poor. The cure, some argued, was not to burn the archive, but to rescue the humane core from feudal costume. 17.3 Republic and Diaspora Experiments. Republican thinkers tried to modernize rituals and promote civic morality. Overseas, in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and later North America, teachers kept classical study alive, often linking Confucian ethics with pluralist democracy and human rights. 17.4 PRC Condemnation, then careful revival. After 1949, official rhetoric branded Confucianism feudal. During the Cultural Revolution, temples and tablets fell. By the 1980s to 90s, a cautious rehabilitation began. Confucius reappeared in textbooks. Memorial rites revived in Khufu. Institutes to teach language and culture carried his name abroad. Today, public talk of harmonious society and virtue borrows Confucian tones, even as debates continue about freedom, law, and power. 17.5 New Confucianism. In the 20th century, philosophers like Mu Zongsan, Tang Junyi, Xu Fuguan, and later Tu Weiming argued that Confucianism can converse with Kant, phenomenology, liberalism, that self-cultivation, communal responsibility, and moral metaphysics still matter in a technological age. Others experiment with Confucian democracy or meritocratic proposals. Critics warn against elitism. The conversation is alive, and that is the point. 18. Households and ancestors. Rights, then and now. 18.1 What the rites tried to do. Ancestral tablets and seasonal offerings never meant worship of ghosts in the spooky sense. They were grammars of gratitude. To bow to a tablet is to remember debts, milk, lullabies, fields tilled, and to promise not to hoard the future from your own children. At their best, such rites knit intergenerational care. 18.2 Where they went wrong, and how to mend. When ancestral authority blocked education for daughters or excused abuse, Confucianism betrayed itself. Repair means keeping the gratitude while ending domination. Daughters and sons both educated, elders respected and remonstrated with when they err, inheritance and care arranged justly. The Xunzi, exemplary person, is not male by definition. The term can and must de-gender. 18.3 The living calendar. Across East Asia, festivals still carry Confucian color. Qingming graveside visits in China, Jisa memorials in Korea, school ceremonies that bow to teachers and parents. Many households simplify rites to fit apartments and schedules. The measure is not pomp, but sincerity. 19. A Confucian Field Guide for the 21st Century. Confucianism is not a museum. It is a toolbox for humanizing institutions. Here are ways to use its tools without recreating hierarchy. 19.1 Leadership. Virtue before velocity. Rectify names. Align titles with responsibilities. If manager means coach, measure coaching, not just output. Rule by example. Publish leaders' learning plans and mistake logs. Make humility visible. Ritualize the right things. Start meetings with a thank you round for unseen labor. End with clear commitments. Li as clarity and care, not theater. 19.2 Education. Character with content. Pair STEM with poetry and music, not as decoration, but to educate emotion. Confucius taught poems to soften the heart and sharpen judgment. Replace pure test prep with apprenticeship in trustworthiness. Deadlines kept, sources cited, promises tracked. Build learning communities, modern academies, where mentors and peers practice dialogue, debate, and service. 19.3 Law and Civility. Pre-legal repair. Strengthen mediation and restorative justice. Try relationship repair before punishment. Draft community compacts, neighbor-to-neighbor pledges for shared courtesies, emergency aid, and civic chores. 19.4 Companies and clinics. Ren as policy. In hospitals, make Ren measurable. Quiet hours, family presence, clear consent. In firms, link bonuses to mentoring outcomes. Promote those who grow others, not only those who grow revenue. 19.5 Gender and Generation. No return to the husk. Ensure equal education and leadership access. Write remonstrance channels where juniors can correct seniors without retaliation. This is filial courage, not disobedience. Redesign care systems, parental leave, elder care, so gratitude is shared, not dumped on daughters. 20. Epilogue, the thread and the loom. Dawn again over Shandong's flat winter fields. In a village school, children recite a line. Their breath fogs the air. In Seoul, students bow to teachers on the first day of term. In Kyoto, a shopkeeper opens with a practiced greeting that turns commerce into courtesy. In Hanoi, a family sweeps graves at the Spring Festival. In a Toronto community centre, grandparents teach chopstick etiquette, and teenagers edit a code of conduct for a neighbourhood mutual aid group. None of them thinks of metaphysics. All of them are weaving. Confucianism's wager is simple and demanding. Becoming human is a shared craft. You learn it in rooms where elders correct gently and accept correction in turn, where promises have weight, where ritual lightens rather than binds, where titles match behavior, where the common good steadies debate. When it has failed by forgetting its own heart, by using ritual to dominate rather than dignify, by treating women and the poor as scenery rather than participants. When it has succeeded by slow, patient work. A teacher's posture, a judge's restraint, a child's bow, a city's habit of thanking its sanitation workers. The master once said, "At 15, I set my heart upon learning. At 30, I stood firm. At 40, I had no more doubts." The world rarely affords such neat decades, but the path remains. Learn, practice, stand, question, release, and, when the time comes, teach. In that relay, past to present to future, the thread does not break. The brush lifts. The snow on the courtyard has stopped. Somewhere, a bell. It is time to begin again.